Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get to today, but first, we are at 2,320 subscribers to the channel. Shout out to all the subscribers, and as always, special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members, HaWKxXA, Brandon Mikel, Scott Todd, Rip, Hasher for MVP, VGK Tiger 75, John Harper, and Salacious Crumb. All right, it's time for another episode of evaluating a potential Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator. Yesterday was our debut episode. If you haven't seen that video yet, please go do so now. We take a look at one of the most likely candidates for the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator job. In this video, we're going to take a look at another likely candidate for the coordinator job. This is a guy that we have already interviewed, it seems like, but not to get ahead of myself here, let's go ahead and jump in. You guys know the criteria we're using. You guys know how we're evaluating these guys if you watched yesterday's video. So we're going to jump right in on Anthony Lynn, former head coach of the San Diego Chargers. Held that position for 4 years, made the playoffs once, won one playoff game, got fired just less than 2 weeks ago. So what can we say about Anthony Lynn? Does he fit with this team? Does he fit with this coaching staff? Does he make sense for the Seahawks to pick up? We're going to be trying to determine that by looking at his resume over the last 11 seasons, and we're going to try to determine how well he makes sense and whether or not I, as a fan, would be excited to get Anthony Lynn. And it seems like this is one of the clubhouse leaders. He's emerged as such over the last couple days. He may be the clubhouse leader. So it is right now probably more likely than anything else that Anthony Lynn ends up as our next offensive coordinator. So however you may feel about it, prepare yourself for the possibility of it happening. All right, with that being said, let's go in. Anthony Lynn, what can we say about him? 52 years old, not young. Maybe a little older than average as far as coaches in the NFL go. Not prohibitively old, but not somebody you would expect to be around for a long time. Also, the fact that he recently held a head coaching job in the NFL tells you that he's probably going to be using a coordinator position as an opportunity to climb the ladder back to head coach. So if you got Anthony Lynn, he probably would not be around for all that long if he did well. If he didn't do well, then he might not be around very long because you get rid of him. So either way, Anthony Lynn is likely to be a short-term fix at the position. But what are the odds of him succeeding or failing? Well, let's take a look at him over the last 11 seasons. First, from 2010 to 2012, he was the running back coach of the New York Jets, and he produced some pretty good results in these 3 seasons. So first, 2010, he was 11-5. The Jets went 11-5. This was the second of the 2 trips to the AFC title game that Mark Sanchez made. The Jets' offense was okay. They scored 23 points a game, 13th in the league, which was slightly above average. Nothing special, but okay. As for the running backs on the Jets, well, they used a 2-headed monster in the form of elder LaDainian Tomlinson, who had his last great year this year for the Jets, and then Sean Green, who was the young up-and-comer in the backfield. Tomlinson had a solid year, over 900 yards on 4.2 yards a carry, plus he did good work as a receiving back, of course, as he always did in his career. And then Sean Green came as the backup, averaged 4.1 yards a carry, almost 800 yards. The Jets were 4th in the league in rushing this year. They ran the ball a lot, which you would want to do when Mark Sanchez is your quarterback and you need him to just be able to manage the game. So it's safe to say that the Jets had really good production from their running backs this year. Now, LaDainian Tomlinson was an all-time great before he ever got anywhere near Anthony Lynn. Obviously, Tomlinson's resume from the Chargers alone would make him an all-time great running back. But he got good production out of both guys this year as a running back coach. The next year, the Jets kind of fell off the cliff. They went 8-8. They missed the playoffs. The offense stayed more or less the same. They scored 23.5 points a game, which was, again, 13th in the league. So their offense was slightly above average. As for the running backs, they became more of a workhorse type of backfield, with Sean Green taking the majority of the snaps and carries, over 250 carries, over 1,000 yards, 4.2 yards a carry. Solid year for Sean Green. Tomlinson basically his final season in the NFL. I think it actually was literally his final season in the NFL. He only had 280 yards on 3.7 yards a carry. The Jets were one of the lesser running teams in the league, 22 out of 32. So this year, the Jets and their run game in particular took a significant step back. The next year, which was Anthony Lynn's final season as the full-time running back coach, they went 6-10, so now they were a below-average team, and their offense was terrible. They averaged less than 18 points a game, which was 28th in the league, which is terrible. However, Sean Green actually had another pretty decent season, was able to amass over 1,100 yards, or under 1,100 yards, 3.9 yards a carry, which is not very good, but 8 touchdowns. And then you had Bilal Powell, who had almost 500 rushing yards on 4 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns. So the Jets were actually quite effective at amassing rushing yards this season. They were 12th in the league, which is slightly above average. But they did have one of the worst offenses in the league, so it was not in service of all that much. Now, at this point, Anthony Lynn got a promotion, which might strike some as kind of odd given the fact that his results were not great over this 3-year period. But if you take a look at it in isolation, he was able to get some pretty good stuff out of the running backs, despite the team not really being all that good. So maybe it makes sense why he, at that point, became the assistant head coach of the Jets. And it's not like the Jets were particularly good over these 2 years, don't get me wrong. However, they were good at one particular thing. And this is notable because the Jets over this period of time were not a very good team. In 2013, they were 8-8. They had one of the worst offenses in the league, 18 points a game, which was 29th. And they had one of the worst passing attacks in the league. The next year, they were downright terrible. They went 4-12. Their offense went below 18 points a game to 28th. And they had the worst passing game in the league, 184 yards. However, despite being a bad team with a bad offense and a bad record, the Jets did have a very good rushing attack these 2 years. In 2013, they had the 6th best rush yards per game. And then the next year, despite being a terrible team, they were 3rd in the league in rushing yards per game. And you would expect a team that is this bad to not have rushing yards because they're coming from behind all the time. So this is kind of curious, kind of strange, maybe even a little notable, and may offer some indication as to why Pete Carroll wants Anthony Lynn. All right. Now we move on to his tenure as the assistant head coach on the Buffalo Bills. He followed Rex Ryan to Buffalo and was, again, their assistant head coach. We see some things here that really hammer home why Pete Carroll might want Anthony Lynn as his offensive coordinator. This first year in Buffalo, they went 8-8. They had a decent offense. It was scoring just under 24 points a game. It was 12th in the league, which is a little above average. Only 209 pass yards a game, which was near the bottom, but they were number 1 in the entire NFL in rushing yards per game with 152 yards. The next year, they dropped off a little bit as a team. They went 7-9, but their offense was better. They averaged almost 25 points a game, which was top 10, and they only had 190 pass yards a game, which was 30th in the league. And guess what that means? It means they were incredible running the ball. They averaged 164 rushing yards per game, which was number 1 in the league again. So as the assistant head coach of the Bills, Anthony Lynn was able to help the Bills to have the number 1 rushing attack in the league 2 years in a row. And at this point, the Chargers picked him up to be their head coach. And this is where we get some indication that Anthony Lynn may have some ability to be flexible. Or maybe he was forced into being flexible by his circumstances. But anyway, let's take a look at what he did as the Chargers head coach for these last 4 seasons. First year, 9-7, 22 points a game, which was average. They led the league in passing yards per game, which is certainly antithetical to what he was doing earlier in his career as an assistant head coach. And they were 24th in rushing yards per game, only 100 a game. So this indicates some ability to be flexible depending on your personnel and your situation. It does show that he is able to recognize when you need to pass the ball more than you run the ball. But it's not like the results they had this year were particularly phenomenal. So let's take a look at the next year instead, 12-4. The Chargers were very good this year. They scored almost 27 points a game, which was almost top 5. They averaged 256 passing yards a game, which was top 10. and 117 rushing yards. So they had a nice balanced attack in 2018, and they still featured the pass game a little more than they featured the run game. They were driven by their passing game. So that's encouraging, I suppose. That indicates some ability to be flexible, some ability to succeed, even without running your offense exactly the way you might like. Now, the last 2 years have not been great. The 2019 campaign featured 5-11 with 21 points a game, which was 21st in the league, which is well below average. They were top 6 in passing yards per game, for whatever that's worth. That's what's going to happen when you're playing from behind all the time. And they were one of the worst running teams in the league, only 91 yards a game, which was 28th. So, again, we see a Chargers team that features the pass over the run. And last year, with Herbert and a little bit of Tyrod Taylor instead of Phillip Rivers, they went 7-9, 24 points a game, which was about average. And they passed the ball really well. 271 pass yards per game, which was 6th in the league, and they had an average rushing attack. So there is definitely reason to believe that Anthony Lynn does have the ability to be flexible and not just be run. But if you take a look at what he did as an assistant previously, he was on teams that did do very little other than just run the ball a lot. Buffalo and the Jets. So my final evaluation of Mr. Anthony Lynn would be this. As in terms of feasibility, whether or not he wants to be here and we would want him to be here, I would say 10 out of 10. He needs to rebuild his credibility as a coordinator for at least a little while if he wants to become a head coach again, and I think he knows that. I think he would want to come here and try to be a coordinator so he could convince a team in a few years to give him another chance. Fit with Pete Carroll, 10 out of 10. He has a phenomenal run of being on elite rushing teams. If you take a look at what he did as an assistant, the Jets were top 6 both years. He was there top 3 one year. And then for 2 straight years in Buffalo, he had the number 1 rushing team in the league. So I believe Carroll would love to have Anthony Lynn. Now, what about his fit with the modern NFL? Because as you guys know, I don't really believe the running game can be the driving force behind an elite team and elite offense in this day and age. I'm not going to say that he's bad in this category. I gave him a 6 out of 10. He did produce some decent results as a Chargers head coach without having a run game. They won 9 games and had an average offense in 2017, even though they had a very bad rushing attack. Every year that Anthony Lynn was the head coach for the Chargers, they featured the pass over the run. So he is capable of having some success without a dominant rushing attack. I still feel like he wants to run the ball, a majority of the time. I feel like some of his philosophies are out of date, but he has shown some flexibility in recent seasons and had some success with it. So I said 6 out of 10. My overall score, this is just how I would feel if we got Anthony Lynn. I gave him a 6 out of 10. If we get Anthony Lynn, it's a likely indicator that we're going to be run heavy in 2021. It is. I know he did pretty well in San Diego with a pass first, or LA with a pass first attack, but if we get Anthony Lynn, it tells me we're going to try to get back to a run first offense, which I hate. However, I will say this, he is overqualified to be an offensive coordinator. He's been an assistant head coach for 4 years and a head coach for 4 years. So he is overqualified, and he has something to prove. So I'm not going to say he's below average as far as offensive coordinators would go, but I would not be terribly excited to bring him on. And that's my evaluation of Anthony Lynn. I'll see you guys later today with another coordinator evaluation. Peace out, go Hawks. Enjoy the games today.